If you were to run, would you consider the polling that would show your run might actually help the Democrat in getting
It could,
reelected?
but I have some very smart people that actually say I hurt Obama more than I hurt whoever the Republican candidate might be. And I actually think I take a lot of independent voters away from Obama.
Might you get Bloomberg into the race?
The thinking is that Obama, and who knows what it is, they tell you all of this stuff and then they turn out to be wrong. But there's a certain group that thinks that I actually hurt Obama more than I would hurt the Republican candidate. So I'm thinking about it. But two things has happened. The economy has to stay bad and maybe even get worse, which I think will happen because the leadership is so bad. And the other thing that has to happen is the Republicans have to pick somebody. We know it's not going to be Ronald Reagan, unfortunately, right. Okay? So the Republicans have to pick somebody that, in my opinion, and in the opinion of others, will not be a very good candidate for what I believe in.
With the buzz these days that Rick Perry might be getting in, what do you think about him?
Well, I don't know him. It'll be very interesting. I think it's good that he's getting in, but I don't know him.
Half the jobs in the United States have been created in Texas in the past couple of years. Do you have business interests in Texas?
I have friends in Texas, not business interests, but I don't know him. I met him one time at the Correspondents Dinner. Interesting subject, the Correspondents Dinner. I go to the Correspondents Dinner, and everybody is absolutely, couldn't be nicer. I go in, and there's a tremendous amount of paparazzi. I was a candidate at this time. So the paparazzi is screaming at me, are you going to run? Are you going to run? Okay, that's number one. But the thing they really want to know, will the president mention your name? I never even thought of it. I'm just going to the dinner. And I went with Lally Weymouth of the Washington Post, right? I was at her table. So I say, I don't know. They say, will he mention? They kept screaming, will he? I said, I don't know, probably not. So I get to the table, and Obama devotes a huge portion of his speech to me. Jokes, not bad jokes. It was okay. Then they had a comedian, Seth something, who was terrible. I mean, he couldn't speak properly. He had marbles in his mouth. But Obama was good. And he was fair, and he was cute. He picked a picture of the White House with Trump on it, Trump White House, and it was all cute. But I wanted to be stoic. I wanted to keep a stoic face. I don't want to be laughing too much. But I loved it, and I had such a good time. And I actually hit my wife under the table. I said, the way you do, where you wanted to listen to something. I said, baby, do you believe this? The President of the United States is devoting most of his speech and almost all of his jokes to me. This is cool. This is great. I liked it. I had a great time. So I had a great time at the dinner. I leave, and everybody said that was amazing. The next day I read in the press, Trump hated the dinner. Trump felt he was humiliated. Trump, such lies. They made it like I didn't like. I loved it. I really loved it. And I was impressed, and I was surprised that he would devote so much time to me. And I really had a great time, and people with me had a great time. And we left, and we talked about it. And the next day, Trump humiliated at dinner. Trump was stoic. He didn't want to look at any. It was ridiculous. I had such a great time. And that was the beginning. That was when I started realizing how protected Obama is, and what really liars the certain members of the press are. I mean, there are people in the press that are horrible. I mean, horrible in order to protect this guy. And I never understood why. I don't get it. They protect him like he's their child. And I don't understand. But I had a great time at the Washington Correspondents Dinner. Couldn't have had better. Was shocked that he devoted so much time to me. Was impressed that he devoted so much time to me. Left, went to sleep, woke up, and read how I hated it. I mean, it's terrible. Honestly, it's terrible.
Speaking of enjoyed it, you really are an American success story. Your grandparents, like my grandparents, were immigrants to this country. Your mother was an immigrant to the country. You've got a great story on immigration, given your background and your successes. What do you think about the immigration conversation we are not actually having in the country right now?
Well, everyone's afraid to have it because it's a very tough conversation. But it's sort of simple. You either have a country or you don't. You either have a line where you have people that live in this country or people of this country, or you don't. So either you're going to have a country or you're just going to have a free-for-all. And I hate saying it, because it's not necessarily nice, because you have wonderful, we're all people, whether they're in Mexico or any place else, we're all people. But you either have a line in the sand, you either have a country or you don't have a country. So to me, it's fairly simple. Now, you even talk about security risks and everything, and you look at the kinds of crime that's committed in, you know, some of these border states, it's very tough. But you have to create, you have to have a country. You have to know how many citizens you have. You have to have a degree of respect. When people can just pour over and then go back, by the way, take the money and go back to their country and spend it. Because you know what? They don't want this country. They want to go back to their country. Even if they're living in conditions that you wouldn't want to live in, they want to go back to their country. That's their home. I've seen it 100 times. I have people, they come here and I see them, and they work hard to become a citizen. They get their green card. They do the whole thing. And they're doing a great living. And they came from poverty in another country. Mm-hmm. And I say, so what are you going to do when you retire? Oh, I'm going back to my country. My country is the most incredible country. That's the way it is. You know, that's human nature. That's life. But they take the money from our country and then they go and spend it in their country. So it's a problem. Now, I read one article recently that I found amazing. That immigration, that the people aren't crossing the border anywhere, not because of us, because we're doing anything, mm-hmm. but because the standard of living in their country is getting better than the standard of living in the United States. And they can make more money by staying in their country than they can by crossing the border. And in one way I said to myself, wow, you know, and that's like a backhanded slap. But where the money and the economy is better in their country than it is over here, so they don't even bother.
There's actually a recent article I read about Americans immigrating to China because the entrepreneurial spirit is more alive in China now than here.
Well, I've had many, many very, very smart kids come to my office where I know the father or the mother, and they want to see me and talk about, you know, they're going to college. And they say, Mr. Trump, where would you recommend I go? And I don't like saying it, but in terms of pure economics, you know, you go to China, you go to the Middle East, you go to different places. That's the other thing. You know, the Chinese send their children over to Harvard, over to the Wharton School of Finance. Right. They get educated, and then we throw them out of the country. So we educate them, but then we throw them out of the country. But in a way, even worse, they send their kids over, they take our best schools, they use seats. They use seats. You know, you only have so many seats at Wharton, and you only have so many seats at Stanford and Harvard. They use seats, and then they go back to China and they rip us off. It's an amazing thing. We run this country so stupidly, it's hard to believe. But when you think of that, they come from foreign countries, they get educated in our best schools, therefore taking places of people from our country that could be educated in those schools. They then leave and they beat the hell out of our country in years to come. Isn't it crazy?
It is. One last question for you. News Corporation, the attacks going on right now, part of it is politics, but part of it is a real scandal. If you were the head of News Corp right now, what would you be doing?
That's a tough situation, because what's going on now with News Corp, I never thought I'd see it. And Rupert's been a friend of mine for a long time. I never thought I'd see this happen to Rupert. Mm-hmm. He was tremendous, and is tremendous, but he was tremendous, built an amazing company. I never, ever thought, and you know what you learn? You know what you learn from this more than anything else? No matter how big and how powerful and how tough and how smart you are, life is very fragile.
Mm-hmm. Do you think a lot of the attacks are politically motivated?
Yes, I think so, but they've allowed themselves to be attacked by doing whatever supposedly was done. Now, maybe it wasn't done, but it sounds certainly like it was done, at least in the one newspaper. So they've allowed that to happen. Certainly it's political. I mean, people that were petrified of Rupert for years, and even other newspapers, you see it now with the Times, and you know, the Times, every day they have 2 or 3 stories about it, right? So people that were petrified of Rupert for years are now just going after him. It's amazing. The feast is on. And you know, I'm surprised that that was allowed to happen, but it does show, more than anything else, Eric, and I say this and to all of your viewers, and you have a lot of them, congratulations.
Thank you.
But I say to all of your viewers, no matter how smart, no matter how tough, no matter how cunning you are, life is fragile.
Is it true you marched up Fifth Avenue when you were in high school?
Yes. I was at New York Military Academy, and I was a very high-ranking cadet. And I was at the front of the cadets as we marched up Fifth Avenue. And we marched from about 42nd Street to 68th Street for the Memorial Day Parade, which in those days, today you hardly have one. But in those days, it was like a big thing, because in those days, people were proud of this country. But I was the leader of the parade in my school, and I marched up the Fifth Avenue. I had the sword and the whole thing, military academy, right? It was great. And I look at those pictures now, and Trump Tower wasn't built, and I look around and all the buildings I've built, it's sort of an amazing thing. But before that, there was no Trump. Nobody knew who Trump was.
You've been the leader of a parade for a while. Reading some of your biographies, a lot of people credit you with the revival of Manhattan and the real estate.
Well, I think I've done a really good job, and I've put a lot of people to work, and I've got a lot of people through school, through the money that I've paid them. And, I'm very proud of the job I've done. But I've employed tens of thousands of people, much more than that, and over the years. And, I've done some things that I'm very proud of.
Donald Trump, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Eric.
I'm Erick Erickson. You've been listening to my interview with Donald Trump. Have a great day.